Hello, Croeso Vulture. Welcome back to the channel. Old boy here. And tonight I've got some couple of interesting articles I want to show you. So first off, there was a recent article that was published regarding cannibalism in Magdalenian groups of people. Now, Magdalenian groups of people, they are people who existed between 17,000 years ago and 12,000 years ago. So that's going from between the Upper Paleolithic to the Mesolithic in Western Europe. And essentially, they found some bones which indicate that there was cannibalism going on. And then off the back of that, because they think they were using it for potentially a food source, because they were trying to extract a nutrient-dense parts of the bones. However, off the back of that, I have found an older article and an older scientific study, also amongst these groups of people. And they talk about how it seems to be, or their conclusions are, that it was also ritualistic in these other instances. So we're going to look at that as well. Now, before we do that, I just want to give you a couple of announcements and such. So, as I said last week, on last week's live stream, when we looked at the Jarl's homestead that had been found in Cumbria, so I've got permission to go there on Wednesday. So the landowner is going to let me on site, along with the archaeologists who are running the dig. So I'm going to be able to speak to them and talk about how it was found and how significant this find is, and how it can potentially change the way we perceive the notion of Viking settlements in Britain. So that's going to be on Wednesday. Then I'm also speaking to Ryan Seven on Wednesday as well. So we're going to record an episode for you, which will be released shortly after that. And then finally, I'm also in talks at the moment with securing another guest for the channel. And this person has an MA in classical civilizations, and he has spoken in the past about piracy in ancient Greece. So I'm hoping to get a date sorted, and that I can announce a little bit more shortly. But I'm very excited about that. I think it's a fantastic and interesting topic, and a topic that you don't often see. You don't often see a lot of people actually discussing it and going into details. So I'm very, very excited, very fascinated, and hopefully I can announce something more concrete moving forward. But just to let you know what's going on behind the scenes. Now, I am just going to give a quick plug here to my last video, which I just released today. So this is a video on the Devil's Arrows. So for those of you that don't know, the Devil's Arrows are 3 standing stones arranged in an alignment. There's not very many that are in a straight or almost straight alignment like this in the UK. That one that you can see there is the second tallest standing stone in Britain after the Rudston monolith. So, and it's also connected to Thornborough henges as well. So the experts believe this is connected to the wider ceremonial landscape in the area, because there's lots of henges as well, and there's also Thornborough henges. So if you've watched that video and you saw that I mentioned the Devil's Arrows, here's a little bit more information on it. And in the video, I try and find remnants of the lost 4th stone that was apparently there. And I believe, I mean, there's articles saying, and the local council say it's ended up in a bridge. I went down there and I saw what I believe looks like the same stone as the stone that these standing stones are made out of. So if you want to look at that, and as well, if there's any geologists out there, because obviously I'm a layman, I'm literally just going off my observations from both locations. So if there's anybody out there that is a geologist and has more information on that, please do check it out. Let me know your thoughts as well, because I'd be very interested. And I welcome people who are maybe more academic in that field. I welcome their point of view. Okay, so now I've said that, let's jump into the main article here. Let me just check it's I'm going to go full screen for you so you can see it all. And this article came out on the 13th of February here. Early Europeans celebrated victory in war by eating their enemies' brains, cave fossils show. Demographic expansion after the last glacial maximum may have led to conflicts. Okay. So let's have a look at this. And then, as I said, I've got another case study that we're going to look at, which we'll be able to extract a bit more information from. So fossils unearthed from a Polish cave suggest early Europeans engaged in cannibalism, sometimes even eating the brains of their enemies during a time of war about 18,000 years ago. The findings, published in the journal Scientific Reports, shed more light on the mortuary and ritual practices of Magdalenian hunter-gatherers who lived in what is now Poland. So again, these Magdalenian hunter-gatherers, they are... this signifies people, groups who are living in the later cultures of the Upper Neolithic and the Mesolithic in Western Europe. So that's roughly about 17,000 years ago to about 14,000 years ago. So it's regarding these kinds of people who were living in what is now Poland. Previous research suggested that the ancient human societies resorted to cannibalism either for ritual purposes or due to starvation. The latest study shows evidence of cannibalism on dozens of bones taken from the Mazishka cave near Krakow. Apologies if I've mispronounced that as well. During a series of digs through the 19th and 20th centuries until the 1960s. Since most of the bones were splintered when they were unearthed, it was not known that they were of human origin. Now analysing cut marks on 53 of the bones using 3D microscopy techniques, scientists can confirm nutritional exploitation of the bodies. And that's they're going to expand on that in a moment, but they're looking for the most nutrient-dense parts. And here's the entrance to one of the caves here as well. The analysis confirms the bodies were processed shortly after death without much time given for decomposition. It shows many of the marks on the fossil human bones to be consistent with marks on animal bones that had been cut up and consumed, researchers say. Some fossil bones even appear to have been cracked open to remove their nutrient-rich marrow marrow for consumption. And here's some pictures here of the cannibalized human remains. Cut marks on the skulls point to the removal of the scalp and flesh to access the brain, an organ rich in nutrients. Marks and intentional fractures of the bones point to the extraction of muscle bundles, brain and marrow. This systematic manipulation suggests a comprehensive consumption of the remains, prioritizing the most nutrient parts, researchers say. The location and frequency of the cut marks and intentional fracturing in the skeleton clearly show nutritional exploitation of the bodies, ruling out the hypothesis of a funerary treatment without consumption. Study co-author Francesc Marginedas from the University of Rovira Virgili said, and apologies if I pronounced that incorrectly. And here's close up showing you some of the cut marks on the bones, which they've obviously analysed using this technique. The human bones were found mixed in with those of animals, suggesting that they may have been consumed together. Since all the bones were dated to roughly the same period, researchers suspect the animals and humans may have been killed in the same event, likely during a time of war. Cannibalism is a behaviour documented at various times in human evolution. In prehistoric context, it could respond to both survival needs and ritual practices, or even intergroup violence dynamics, Palmira Salidie, another author of the study, said. So what's interesting about this is earlier it seemed to suggest that the notion of it being for ritual purposes, this was kind of superseding that. However, one of these authors of the study does say here, it says in prehistoric context, it could respond to both survival needs and ritual practices. So I just wanted to point that out. And as well, in the other study we're going to look at, where they believe there was ritual engraving of the bones performed, it also says they were snapped open as well. So that indicates that they could have potentially been looking at the marrow as well, looking for the marrow rather, just as they are in this study here. A demographic expansion following the last glacial maximum about 20,000 years ago may have intensified competition for resources, leading to confrontations between different early human communities, researchers say. Such a conflict in some cases may have led to war cannibalism, they suspect. So there we go. That's the first article there. I'm just going to have a look at the comments quickly, and I'll just pop myself back on screen so you're not just staring at a load of ads. So, hey, Sar, looks great to see you back. Rock and roller. Excellent. Great to see you. Thanks for being here. Hey, Nick. Thanks for tuning in. Great to see you, matey. I can't believe they gave you an advertisement for food delivery. That's bad, that. Hey, Banner. Hey, Green Onion. Electric Funeral. Great to see you. Hey, Thomas Eriksson. Great to know there's people watching in Norway. So if anybody does have any questions for me to ask on site when I go and visit this Jarl's stead that's been found, post it in the comments, and I'm more than happy to go and take some questions over. Sal Luck says, why they're called the Devil's Arrows. So back to the Devil's Arrows video, that it's named that just because in the Victorian era, a lot of folk myths started surfacing where it just says the devil tried to throw them at Borough Bridge and missed. So I mean, it's just a name off a tall tale, really, where they don't really know who built them or what they were for exactly. There are theories, but obviously nothing's proven. So hey, Magic Magazine, great to see you. Tuning in from Australia. I can imagine it's early there. Appreciate you being here. Hermetic Rose, great to see you. Tammy, great to see you. Thanks for tuning in. Seawolf Acker, hey. Aloha from Hawaii. Great to see there's people watching from Hawaii. That blows my mind. Hey, Rhonda, great to see you. Shelley, great to see you too. Some channels are claiming it was done by Neanderthals, Magic Magazine says. I'm assuming referring to the cannibalism here. So I wonder if there's any mention of anything like that when I look in this other article. I did have a quick scan through. Obviously, I've pre-read these things, but I can't remember if there was anything mentioned there at all. Anyways, great to see you all there. Thanks for your input in the chat. Now let's get on to this older article here. So this is actually from 2017. Cannibals who once lived in Somerset Cave engraved human bones as part of eating ritual study finds. And these are bones that were recovered from Gough's Cave, which is actually in Cheddar Gorge, famous obviously for Cheddar Man. The engraving of this bone may have been a sort of story tale more directly related to the deceased than the surrounding landscape. And look, you can see these cut marks here. I've not even got the screen on. I'm sorry, guys. Here we go. Damn. Here we go. There we are. So look, you can see these cut marks here. They're not just from, slicing flesh off the bone. It's not just a sawing back and forwards. They seem to be intentional, different strokes, according to the experts here. So the bones were engraved and then broken, suggesting it was an intrinsic part of the cannibalistic ritual. Human bones appear to have been engraved as part of a complex cannibalistic ritual by people who once lived in Somerset, according to new research. The bones, which had a number of deliberate cuts and human tooth marks, were discovered at Gough's Cave in the Mendip Hills and are believed to be between 12,000 and 17,000 years old. The cave has been associated with cannibalism before, but the marks provide evidence that eating human flesh was a ritualistic behaviour. Despite numerous accounts of people living as cannibals throughout history, the practice is believed to be almost entirely associated with religious behaviour or funerary rites, with no conclusive evidence that any group of people relied on human flesh as a staple food. So I'm guessing the last articles may be saying that that was an instance where that was the case, and maybe that's why they were saying it was setting a bit of a precedent. But that's not to say that ritualistic or funerary rituals, this wasn't also performed in that ritual kind of process. There has been a debate as to whether the marks on the bones found at Gough's Cave were simply caused by the process of butchering the corpses or whether they had been intentionally engraved. But writing in the journal, PLOS ONE, researchers from the Natural History Museum concluded there was no doubt that a series of zigzagging incisions are engraving marks produced with no utilitarian purpose apart from an artistic representation. Similar to other engraved bone artifacts from Gough's Cave, the incisions are very consistent in their lengths, overall pattern and technique of production, they added. Unlike filleting marks, which are generally produced in a single stroke slicing motion, the engraving is produced by a combination of single stroke, to and fro, and scraping incisions. The researchers said that the engravings appear to have been made by a single individual using one tool at one time. And after the carvings were made, the bones were broken to extract their marrow. The sequence of the manipulations strongly suggests that the engravings was an intrinsic part of the multi-stage cannibalistic ritual, and, as such, the marks must have been, or rather must have held, a symbolic connotation, the researchers wrote. We can only speculate about the context in which this happened. The engraving of objects and utilitarian tools has been linked to ways of remembering events, places, or circumstances, a sort of written memory and symbolic glue that held together complex social groups. The engraving of this bone may have been a sort of story tale, more directly related to the deceased than the surrounding landscape, perhaps indicative of the individual, events from their life, the way they died, or the cannibalistic ritual itself. They said the bones were not made to be carried around, but were quickly engraved with minimal preparation, then broken and discarded. This suggested it was part of a complex funerary cannibalistic behaviour that has never been recognised before the Paleolithic period. Dr. Sylvia Bello, a Natural History Museum researcher, said the engraving of the bones would have been rich in symbolic connotations. Although in previous analyses we have been able to suggest that cannibalism at Gough's Cave was practiced as a symbolic ritual, this study provides the strongest evidence for this yet, she said. So there you go. That's kind of like the, in a nutshell, view here from the Independent. Now let's jump over to the article, the journal, PLOS ONE. So this is the original journal here. So let's see if there's any more info here in this article. And again, this was from 2017. So it says, abstract. Cut, marked and broken human bones are a recent feature of Magdalenian, it says here, circa 17,000 to 12,000 years BP, European sites. Human remains at Gough's Cave, UK, have been modified as part of a Magdalenian mortuary ritual that combined the intensive process of entire corpses to extract edible tissue and the modification of skulls to produce skull caps. Now, this is interesting because I believe in later accounts, there are also mention of groups like the Scythians making these kind of skull caps. So perhaps an interesting thing to do, because I have got a bit of extra time next week because I'm not trying to, run around and film footage for a video because I'm going on site. So perhaps I can have a look through the classical sources to see if there are any other accounts of this in the classical literature, to see if anything survives going through, into that period, because obviously there must be one. I believe it's Herodotus. I believe this is just off the top of my head. I think it's Herodotus who talks about it, and that's very interesting. That there seems to be a group carrying on and using skull caps. So maybe there's other stuff in there. So if that sounds like a good idea, let me know in the comments, because I'm quite happy to do that. Maybe we can do a bit of a part 2 on this if there's any interesting sources. A human radius from Gough's Cave shows evidence of cut marks, percussion damage and human tooth marks indicative of cannibalism, as well as a set of unusual zigzagging incisions on the lateral sides of the diaphysis. These latter incisions cannot be unambiguously associated with the filleting of muscles. We compared the macro and micro morphological characteristics of these marks to over 300 filleting marks on human and non-human remains, and to approximately 120 engraved incisions observed on 2 artifacts from Gough's Cave. So it's interesting here as well that in these other Magdalenian sites, there's a mixture of human and animal bones, just as there were in the more recent article that we've just looked at. The new macro and micro morphometric analyses of these marks, as well as further comparisons with French Middle Magdalenian engraved artifacts, suggest that these modifications are the result of intentional engraving. The engraved motif comfortably fits within a Magdalenian pattern of design. What is exceptional in this case, however, is the choice of raw material, human bones, and the cannibalistic context in which it was produced. The sequence of the manipulations suggests that the engraving was a purposeful component of the cannibalistic practice, implying a complex ritualistic funerary behaviour that has never been recognised for the Paleolithic period. So let's just have a look at a couple of these images here. So you can see they've highlighted areas where there's cut marks on the bone here. And gosh, how do I get off this now? Oh, I've ruined it, look. Technology, eh? There we go. We're back. We're back. So yeah, you can tell these do seem to be quite deliberate rather than just incidental, as you are just trying to harvest edible material. And look, some of these are quite pretty intense. A vast number here. So there's just some photos. There's going to be some more later as well. So let's get into the introduction. Engraving is usually associated with the intellectual creations of Homo sapiens, although isolated finds of linear designs engraved on shells from Trinil in Java and on a number of personal ornaments and decorated bone tools associated with Neanderthals suggests that such behaviour was not restricted to this species. So there you go, Magic Magazine. They've mentioned Neanderthal here, but they are saying it's not restricted just to this species. So there you go. It does actually mention them. Mobiliary art perceptibly spread across Europe from the Atlantic coast to the Urals during the Aurignacian, circa 40,000 to 34,000 BP, and reached its prime during the Magdalenian, which is the period we've obviously been looking at. Throughout this latter period, we see the development of rich decorative forms with many portable objects on bone, antler, and ivory engraved with animal representations or geometric designs. However, with the possible exception of an engraved human skull from the Magdalenian site of Isturiz in France, which is still debated, the engraving of human bones is completely absent from the Paleolithic archaeological record. One of the most extensive Magdalenian human bone assemblies comes from Gough's cave, a sizable limestone cave set in Cheddar Gorge, Somerset, UK. Analyses of the human remains have provided unequivocal evidence for nutritional cannibalism. So this is like the other study we've just looked at. And the modification of human calvaria into skull cups. In this paper, we described a right human radius excavated in 1987 by a team led by the Natural History Museum paleontologists at the Magdalenian site of Gough's cave. This bone has been humanly modified by cut marks, percussion damage, and human tooth marks, as well as exhibiting a set of unusual zigzagging incisions on the lateral side of the diaphysis. These were previously noted by Jill Cook, who suggested possibly engraving of the bone surface, but this interpretation was criticised and ultimately dismissed by Andrews and Fernandez Yalvo, who classified them as filleting marks created during butchery. Our new macro and micro morphometric analyses of these marks, as well as comparisons with Magdalenian artifacts, suggest that these modifications are in fact the result of intentional engraving. The association of an engraved human bone with a multi-stage cannibalistic practice suggests that the engraving was a purposeful component of the ritual. This is a unique example of complex cannibalistic funerary behaviour that has never been recognised before within the Paleolithic context. And there's just one of the photos we looked at earlier. Okay, so now let's just jump over to the conclusions and the discussion here. So I'm put the link in the description as well for anybody who does want to dive into this any further. But obviously, I don't want to get fully bogged down with a lot of jargon here, because obviously I'm not an expert. I'm just reading out the article, and I know a lot of you just want to cut through and get to what's easily digestible, because I value your time and I don't want to keep you hanging around. However, I'll put the link in the description, so those of you who do like to get nerdy and look into it, then you can do so. So let's find the conclusions and the discussion. Look, I'll actually just show you some of the... Oh, gosh. So, yeah, look, you can see there's a vast amount there. I don't know what it's doing here. I'm so sorry. Help, I'm stuck. Ah, there we go. Maybe that'll help. Gosh. It's doing me dirty here, isn't it? It's stuck. Right, I'm going to go off it, and I'm just going to stop sharing just 1 second. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring it back up in a moment. Here we go. put my face back on as well, just while I'm suffering these technical difficulties. Right, we're back. We're back. So yeah, maybe I won't click on it this time. Let's just zoom in. But yeah, you can see there's a lot of deliberate multiple marks there. And specifically one of these pieces, which was a horse rib, it looks very, very deliberate. Let me see if I can find it. I had an image of it earlier. No, I'm not going to waste any more time, but it looks very deliberate. Oh, here it is. It's these ones here. They almost look like they've got tallies going around them. So, discussion and conclusions. The use of human bones as a raw material. Sorry, I guess it's there. The use of human bones as raw materials to produce utilitarian or symbolic tools in Paleolithic Europe is rare. The earliest known examples have been described by Werner and de Errico for the Mousterian site of La Quenya, where 3 human cranial fragments have been interpreted as retouchers, which is knapping tools made from organic material used in the manufacture of stone tools. However, the author suggests that the use of Neanderthal bones was accidental and not a choice. Neanderthal skeletal elements used as retouchers have also been described at the sites of Krapina in Croatia, Les Paradelles in France, and Troiseme Cavern of Gough in Belgium. A few European Upper Paleolithic sites have yielded human teeth interpreted as personal ornaments and human calvaria fashioned to make skull caps. So we have seen, obviously, the Celts, which are obviously much later than this, but there's accounts that say they would keep the heads, and there's even artifacts depicting heads hanging from horses as well. So it really does make you wonder how far back this practice, may have originated of personal ornaments or mementos, and especially the use of these skull caps as well. A unique example of a Chalcolithic 3rd millennium BC human femur has recently been described as a burin, possibly to drill animal hide. None of these human objects appear to have been decorated. Only 2 European Mesolithic examples of engraved human remains have been recognized so far. A radius engraved with a series of notches from the site of Lepenski Vir in Serbia, and a child's rib incised with parallel lines from the site of Tevier in France. Perforated human teeth are likewise rare, so far reported from only 3 European Mesolithic sites. Decorated human bones have been described from Neolithic contexts for the sites of Adlerstrop and Hambleton Hill in Britain. Worked and engraved human bones and teeth are a more common feature in Holocene sites in North and Mesoamerica. There are no doubt that the zigzagging incisions on the diaphysis of the human radius from Gough's cave are engraving marks, produced with no utilitarian purpose apart from an artistic representation. Similar to other engraved bone artifacts from Gough's cave, the incisions are very consistent in their lengths, overall pattern, and technique of production, e.g. single stroke and to and fro incisions. Unlike filleting marks, which are generally produced in a single stroke slicing motion, the engraving is produced by a combination of single stroke to and fro and scraping incisions. This combination results in quantifiable differences between the macro and micro morphometric characteristics of the engraved incisions and filleting marks on human and non-human bones from Gough's cave. The more unusual engraving marks observed on the human radius are those produced by pressing during a scraping action. These scraping incisions have not been recognised on any other engraved or filleted animal bone at the site. High values of width and depth of this type of engraving are only comparable with measurements of width and depth of filleting marks on large mammals at Gough's cave. Previous studies have suggested a pattern of wider and deeper cut marks associated with the higher strength necessary to fillet larger muscles. It is therefore plausible that the engraving by scraping was produced using greater pressure than the production of engraving by slicing. This extra strength required is unlikely to be due to a larger amount of meat, but rather the intentionality of leaving visible marks on the bone. However, what is striking is the consistency in the values of the opening angle for all incisions, engraving and filleting marks measured on bones at Gough's cave, which suggests that similar tools were used to butcher human and non-human carcasses and for engraving bones. The even closer similarity of the micromorphometric parameters of filleting marks on the human bones and the engraving itself may also indicate that the filleting of human bodies during cannibalism and the engraving of human bones were intricately related, probably made using the same tools by the same butcher/engraver and in succession. Although the scraping incisions appear to be the result of an unusual engraving technique, the zigzagging patterns itself is not unique for this period. Repetitive geometric designs, sometimes called schematic or non-figurative art, are very common in Paleolithic art. Frequent forms include notches, zigzagging lines, wave and chevron patterns. Widespread during the Magdalenian is the engraving of zigzagging or crisscrossing, according to different authors, motifs formed by successive parallel incisions cutting the main axis of the artifact perpendicularly. This type of representation seems to be particularly recurrent in the Middle Magdalenian, which is 15,000 to 14,000 before present, that stands for, in southwestern France. Examples that present decoration remarkably similar to the one on the human radius from Gough's cave have been observed at the sites of Brassempoy, Dorothée, and Isturitz, and sorry if I've pronounced those incorrectly. In all these cases, the engraving was on a flat bone surface, more often from a rib of a large mammal, modified to produce lissoirs, which are bone tools. Is that lissars or lissoirs? Which are bone tools used to prepare and smooth hides. The engraving of these artifacts was generally preceded by the manufacture of the bone tool and scraping of the bone surface from the periosteum. Overall, these modifications are indicative of a more complex chantier opératoire in the manufacture and engraving of an object that was probably frequently used, curated, and carried around for some time. So look at some of these artists' representations of the artifacts. So you can clearly see, you know, it's intentional. It's not something that's just come from trying to extract nutrients. The engraved motif observed on the human radius from Gough's cave, for which human bones have been directly dated at around 14,700 before present, comfortably fits within a Middle Magdalenian pattern of engraving. And I prefer saying BC, but obviously I'm not quick enough to do the maths right off the bat, so I'm just literally quoting what they've said. What is exceptional in this case, however, is the choice of raw material, human bone, and the context in which it was produced. The engraved bone was part of a cannibalistic ritual, and the individual to whom it belonged was certainly disarticulated, skinned, and its muscles filleted. It is possible that the skull was used to produce one of the skull caps, although only DNA analysis currently in progress could associate this radius with one of the skull caps found at the site, while the long bones were chewed and broken to extract marrow. The radius itself presents evidence for disarticulation, filleting, and chewing marks. The breakage of the bone to extract marrow, however, cut across the engraving. It is therefore likely that the bone was engraved after it was cleaned of the muscle and tendons, but not of its periosteum by scraping, and before breakage occurred. The engraving itself was produced by a single individual using one tool and during only one event. The bone was probably placed flat, and the engraving produced from the distal end of the diaphysis towards the proximal epiphysis. The sequence of the manipulation strongly suggests that the engraving was an intrinsic part of the multi-stage cannibalistic ritual, and as such, the marks must have held a symbolic connotation. We can only speculate about the context in which this happened. The engraving of objects and utilitarian tools has been linked to ways of remembering events, places, or circumstance, a sort of written memory and symbolic glue that held together complex social groups. The engraving of this bone may have been a sort of story tale, more directly related to the deceased than the surrounding landscape, perhaps indicative of the individual, events from their life, the way they died, or the cannibalistic ritual itself. Unlike the other artifacts present on the site, the engraving was not made to last over time, and the radius was not made into an object that the group would have carried around. It was quickly engraved with minimal preparation, i.e. no scraping of the bone surface, possibly not following more standard procedures, e.g. the presence of scraping marks have never been observed on any other Magdalenian engraved artifacts or sophisticated techniques compared to the engraved bone and antler artifacts at Gough's cave. It was then broken and discarded. The sequence of the manipulations can only imply that the engraving was a purposeful component of the cannibalistic ritual at the site, with the act of engraving itself as significant as the finished motif, suggesting a complex funerary cannibalistic behaviour that has never been recognised before for the Paleolithic period. So there you go, everybody. I mean, it's very fascinating. I'll just pop myself back up there. It's certainly very fascinating, and it does actually make me want to now just dive into some of these classical sources to see what I can see if there's anything in there, and maybe having a look at burial practices as well, because I watched a video a while ago about Scythian burial practices, and they certainly seem to extract certain body parts and remove certain parts of the body as well. Also, what about the Scythians who would also make, for example, cases for bows out of human skin and things like that? So there's certainly some kind of reflection going on, or maybe the continuation of certain practices. So if that sounds like something, does that sound like something you would want me to do? To go and have a look in some of these classical sources, maybe have a look to see if I can dig anything up, see if there's any mention of it, because that would be quite interesting to maybe weigh up in terms of an evolution of certain practices over time. So definitely let me know. So Tea with Lilith says yes. So that's good stuff. I mean, I'm happy to do it. So let's dive into it, and hopefully I can do a little bit of a part 2 on this. So I'm just going to have a quick look in the chat once more, see who's here and who's saying what. So, Banner, great to see you. Rhonda from Indiana, thanks for letting us know where you're from. It's fantastic to know where everyone's viewing from. It's quite crazy to think I'm just sat here in little old England and there's people watching all around the world. That makes me really happy. Right, we've got Jennifer Silvers. Great to see you, and thanks for tuning in while you're at work. I know that can't be easy, and I appreciate you being here. No One's Flower, great to see you here. Chris Newbury as well. I've not seen you for a while, Chris. I hope you're well. Thanks for tuning in, joining us tonight. Grub O'Neill, great to see you. So Electric Funeral says they weren't eating them for food because they were starving. It was mostly ritualistic and symbolic. And yeah, I'm wondering as well about if they saw the consummation as, you know, potentially a way of taking on the essence maybe of, you know, an ancestor, a relative, maybe a hero, whether they thought it would, you know, part of them would maybe live on, some of their essence would kind of remain. I mean, who knows? It's certainly an interesting idea, and I wonder if anybody's written anything on this kind of thing before. It might be worth to go and have a look. Rock and Roller says, do you think the engravings could be early way of writing, like the Ogham and stuff? I mean, who knows at this stage, really? I mean, I guess we would have to consider how early on people were. I mean, they were obviously making cave art and stuff at this time, so they were certainly, you know, capable of creating these works of art. So surely they would have had certain symbols that they would be using as well. I mean, personally, I don't know. I mean, at this stage, we can only speculate, in all honesty, but it's definitely an interesting thought to consider. So if I do see anything that comes up which relates to that, I'll definitely mention it, because obviously I know people are interested. But good question, Rock and Roller. If anyone's got any info on that, let us know in the comments as well. So here, electric funeral, again, the same way that native tribes eat the heart of a deer to take on the power of that animal. So that's really interesting, because that's what I was thinking as well. So I would love to know more about that. So if you've got any sources on that electric funeral, let me know in the comments afterwards. I'm more than happy to check this out, because it's a really interesting kind of area of study, this, for me, because certainly when you look at the classical sources later, I believe there's one, and was it Pythagoras? He has a student who's an athlete, and he suggests that he starts consuming meat, whereas the other athletes were consuming figs and stuff because of the essence of the animal and how it would make them stronger. So I can certainly, again, this is just off the top of my head. I'd have to look at the source again. I'm just kind of paraphrasing here, so don't hold me to it. But I've definitely seen things related to that. So very, very interesting. And yeah, if you've got any more sources on that electric funeral, please do let me know. Yeah, the first person that ate a heart was yeah, I can't imagine that's nice going. Lots of odd stuff in Sardinia too, says Grub O'Neill, too similar to UK stuff. Well, yeah, I mean, it doesn't surprise me that practices were widespread. I mean, they were making comparisons here with some sites in France as well, which is, it's heading over in that direction. So yeah, the world was a lot more connected than I think we give them credit for. So, just catching up here. Faces in the Stone. Hi, friends. Glad I caught the premiere. That's what they're saying. Thanks for being here. Faces in the Stone. Really appreciate it. Andrew Whelan, great to see you. Hey, Lokides Ionikos, sorry. Great to see you, Loki. Thanks for being here. Tea with Lilith as well, fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us. Spiderbite, great to see you here. Yep, and ritualistic cannibalism, super interesting for me, Electric Funeral says. Has been since I was a child, and read a book talking about how an ancient Egyptian group used to eat brains and hearts of loved ones or special people. Brilliant. Well, that's given me a good thread to look at then. So thank you very much. I'll have to look more into that. So the Egyptians were doing it as well. So that's good to know that I've got a thread to follow now. Little Bird, great to see you. In Utah, Tea with Lilith. Wow, that's amazing. And Texas, Marissa is saying there. Street Dreams, how's it going, old boy? I'm doing great, thank you. And, it's great to see everyone here in the chat. I love connecting with people here. GSMMW from Florida, nice to see you. Ireland here, No One's Flower, brilliant. I need to get over to Ireland at some point. I would really like to go over, get some footage, and make some virtual site tours like I have been doing. So it's definitely on the list. It's on the list, perhaps later in the year. IVR, thank you very much for joining us. This person, IVR, also says Herodotus also speaks about a tribe in India that eats the elder and the wounded. Brilliant. I'll check that out then. That's a good thread, and if I can find it, I'll show it on the part 2 that I'll do. Spiderbite says there was a man who lived with natives in a jungle, and they intended to eat him. He documented it and how he had totally accepted the fact, and he gladly got eaten. Wow, that sounds intense. Magic Magazine. Oh yeah, she says hi from the eye of the cyclone. I forgot. Yeah, you guys have got a really bad storm over there. Apparently it's the worst kind of storm they've had in something like 50, 60 years. So our thoughts are with you. I hope everything's okay there. I hope nothing gets damaged, nobody gets hurt. So yeah, our thoughts are with you over there on the other side of the world. I hope it passes quickly and you get back to normality soon. Seth Renomicon, great to see you. Okay, well, thank you very much for joining tonight. I hope you've all enjoyed it. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday, and I will certainly get into part 2. I'll dive into some of the classical accounts, and I'll have a look and see if there's any other archaeological accounts, maybe see if any of these skull caps have been found, the information about the boar cases made out of skin and things like that. So yeah, I'll certainly see what I can dig up, and I'll do a little short part 2. So thank you very much for watching once again. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday, and catch you on the next one. Oh boy, out.